Hello and welcome to the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast, helping everyday runners fuel better, run smarter, and recover faster so you can reach your full performance potential. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchek, dietitian, fitness coach, and a fellow runner too. As the owner of Stephanie Natchek Performance Nutrition, I've spent the last 10 years helping runners learn to fuel their bodies, level up their running performance, and establish healthier relationships with food and exercise. If you're ready to reconnect with your love of running, then let's get started on today's episode. So before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to invite you to get your name on my Black Friday exclusive offer waitlist. The details of what I have in store coming up for you this Black Friday are still top secret, but you are never going to know what the deals are if you don't sign up and get your name on this list. These special offers are going to be going out to the waitlist only. You're not going to find them on my social media channels. You're not going to find them on my website or anywhere else for that matter. So be sure to head over to the show notes for this episode. You're going to click on the Black Friday waitlist link, add your name and your email address to the list so that you don't miss out. All right, let's get started with today's episode. So hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast, where I am so excited to be sitting down with sports psychology consultant Shannon Mulcahy, who is going to talk to us today all about your runner's mindset and, how you can develop maybe a better mindset or shift your mindset around sports and performance. She's going to bust some myths for us and give us some amazing tips, tricks, and suggestions. So thank you so much, Shannon, for joining me today. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So what I think everyone's probably really interested in to start is to hear a little bit more about yourself, the work that you do. I know that you have a history as an athlete yourself and just how you kind of became interested in sports psychology and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I'm sure we'll elaborate a little bit on some of this. But so I tell people, most people have no idea what sports psychology is. When I run into people, like family, friends are like, what the heck is this? What is it? What do you do? So I tell people is I work with athletes, primarily endurance athletes and coaches, just because that's the domain that I grew up in. And I basically just help athletes with their mindset. There's a lot more that goes into it for sure. I really got into it via my background in swimming. And that's what I grew up doing. And the very short version of it is that I needed a sports psychology consultant or somebody in the field of sports psychology. And I did not know that it existed. I was really struggling with performance anxiety. It was debilitating levels of anxiety. And I finally went to my coach and was like, I need help. This cannot continue. And he gave me a book and was kind of explore this domain a little bit, just kind of see what's there. And it was super eye-opening to me. One, that it existed in the first place, but two, that we didn't know that it existed. So I was on a pretty high level swim team and our coach did go over some sports psychology stuff with us, but the fact that it existed as even a person that I could go see, I thought it was just books or just podcasts or various things, and realizing, there's way more to this than just think positively and your mind is important. And pretty much from that moment on, it felt like in a way like a fate moment of I knew that if I was experiencing that level of anxiety, that other people had to be as well. And I knew that if I didn't know it was a field, other people didn't know either. And so I loved it. I never really looked back. Obviously, there's a ton more that goes into sports psychology than just think positively or, we'll chat about a number of things. But that was the moment for me where I was like, whoa, I need to keep doing this.
Yeah. And what were you studying at the time, or were you not in college or university yet when you had this experience?
Yeah, so I was, I think, a sophomore or junior in high school.
Oh, you were still in high school. Okay.
Yeah, I was still in high school. And it was funny because I remember there being a few swim meets that I was at, championship swim meets, and some of our younger kids, our 10 and unders or 11, 12s were there. And they would get nervous or something. And I would be not even on purpose, but I would just be like, oh, I read about this thing and can help you. And so I was, and none of it was illegal or inappropriate, pretending to be a sports psych or anything. But I just was like, oh, I recognized this and this helped me. And so like before I even knew it was a career, I was basically turning it into a career.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, really, there's so many levels of severity and frequency and stuff like that to things like performance anxiety, that there probably is tremendous benefit for coaches and maybe even parents, kind of at
Mm.
every level, to have some understanding. Obviously, there's a time and a place where referring to a professional and working with a professional is going to be really the most effective way to get help. But, just for that day to day, which we all experience to some degree, I think there's, value in having people around you, and especially peers that can, maybe share some of their strategies and suggestions. So that's really cool. And it's great, to find your kind of calling and your purpose in life at such a young age. I was really lucky too that I knew I wanted to study nutrition when I was still in high school. So it was kind of like this beeline straight path towards my career as well, which I think doesn't happen to too many of us.
Yeah.
So are you able to define, and this may be a really kind of off the wall question to ask, but for people like you said, who really don't know that this is a thing, have never heard of it before, this is a whole new world of conversation that they're hearing right now. Can you sort of define for us what sports psychology is?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's a tough question.
it's
It's a tough
tricky. And
question.
like, yeah, I feel like every time I'm asked this question, I almost answer it differently because I'm still trying to figure out like the best answer for it. But
Yeah, that's
the
fair.
most simple is really sports psychology is like anything to do with your mind and sports
Mhm.
or performance. Like, so I could go on a tangent that I'm not going to, but sometimes we even start calling it more performance psychology because sports
Okay.
psychology can actually, those same principles can be applied to like the military, to dance,
Mm.
to like, other domains.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like sports psychology because I work primarily with athletes, and I think that makes it more like clear on who you're working with essentially. But the application is very similar in most, or yeah, I could go on a whole thing. But so it really is just related to your mind. That can vary from the mental health side of things, which is
Mm-hmm.
not the domain that I particularly fall in. And I will say this just because it is important to know that to be a sports psychologist and call yourself that legally, like you must have the official credentials. Same thing with like being a dietitian, like you have to go through official trainings. And I know sometimes with the age of social media now, there's a lot of people that just are kind of calling themselves things and branding themselves as I help athletes with mental health. And there's definitely like proactive things that can be done. But unless somebody is a sports psychologist and has like gone through clinical training, they are not trained to help you on like clinical mental health issues. And that's just
Okay.
important to know in case you don't know. And I will say this now, excuse me, if anybody listening to this is like, I need more clarification or elaboration, feel free to send me an email and I can explain what that stuff is just because, yeah, I want you to have the information. But back to the original question. So more so the domain that I fall in is the performance side, which is anything to do with like training, racing, competing. How do you get your mind to help you basically on race day? How do you use your mindset to help you in the training so that you're preparing as best you can for race day? So it looks like things like, prepping for performance anxiety, building mental toughness. Sometimes it's setting goals, using visualization. There's a lot of different things that fall under it, but really anything that's encompassing what's going on in your mind.
Yeah, amazing. And so, I think just like needing to be really careful about who you go to for nutrition advice, who you go to for coaching advice, who you go to, for all of these different things, your mindset, your mental health, your, sports psychology, all of that stuff, you do really need to do a little digging, do a little research as the client or kind of as the customer, to make sure that you're working with someone who has the appropriate credentials, who knows and has been through the education and training that they need to help you most effectively. While there's always some value in peer-to-peer sort of support and, having other people who have gone through what you are going through and stuff like that, different things work for different people. And, there's kind of a time and a place for that peer-to-peer help, and a huge time and place for like really working with a professional. So just like everything, do your research, be careful, make sure you're reaching out to the right people. So you've kind of touched on this a couple of times already, but what role can our mindset play when it comes to our success in sport? And, not even necessarily for people who are like elite level athletes that we're talking about winning Olympic medals or anything, but even just for, a lot of listeners to this podcast are, recreational competitive athletes who are signing up for races, they're training for events. And I know that long run anxiety is a huge issue for people, like just that weekly anxiety they get leading up to things like their long runs or their big workouts. And then, of course, race day anxiety is a huge thing. So what role can our mindset play when it comes to being able to successfully overcome some of those anxieties?
Yeah, I mean, mindset is huge. And I always feel like I'm telling people and being like, it's everything. It impacts everything. And I promise I'm not saying that just because like this is my field and where I work, but it really, really does impact everything, even from just your alarm goes off in the morning and you have a run and you're like, oh, I don't want to get out of bed right now. Even that,
Okay.
your mindset is a part of that. And I know we can like
Right.
nitpick things to an extent, and that's not it, but it really is like in that area, that's looking more at the motivation side and the
Mm-hmm.
goal execution. And there's so many ways that it's involved and impacted. And I think most people almost don't see that until they start struggling. And I see a lot of like newer runners who, I mean, there's definitely, I feel like no matter where you are in the running process, there's different like struggles that each type of person faces, but it's really until typically people have that really hard training cycle or they really struggle with like the long runs or the tempo runs, they have that harder race, that they really realize how much their mindset impacts the whole process. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hard to get people to understand that up front. It's like we get it, but we don't really get it until we've like, oh, I really struggled through this. But it really can make such a big difference in, as you said, like long run anxiety, even just execution of that long run, not like just leading up to it, but even if your long run is 2 or 3 hours, that's a really long time to one, be running, two, to have just like a great mindset. Your mindset might tank, or you might experience a little bit of a low. It
Mm.
doesn't mean the whole run is going to stay like that. And that's where knowing, and having some mindset skills can help you understand, I might experience a low and here's what I can do to come out of it. Or even just, it's normal to experience ups and downs. Like it's
Okay.
just so impacted everywhere. It's a very broad question to answer, but it really is
Yeah.
touching on all the little different facets that go into training.
Yeah. And I love that because I think, and we see it a lot, just, we're all immersed in social media day after day. So we see all the memes and all the posts and all the whatever from the different kind of accounts and stuff like that, where people are, we understand, we all sort of have general understanding that, in a race situation, you're going to reach this like really hard part. But I think that where what we don't talk about, or where people don't have skills, and I mean certainly I would fall into this category, is like what happens next. So like you reach that low point, and it just goes away on its own. You just are reach that low point, and then that's just like how you're gonna finish the race. I think that having some skills in some ways to understand that maybe that low point is temporary, and here are some ways that you can actually pull yourself out of that, and overall have a really good experience. Anticipating some ups and downs, I think, is tremendously valuable for people who are doing things that are either really physically challenging in terms of effort, or in terms of duration. Like you said, going out and running for 2 or 3 hours it's a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So is working on our mindset as runners, really kind of the same thing as just developing sort of mental strength and sort of toughness around like being able to push yourself through pain and discomfort, and to kind of, you know, shut down those feelings of pain or discomfort in your body and just continue to push through no matter what? Is that kind of what we're talking about when we look at mindset? Or is there a lot more to it? Can you kind of dig through some of the maybe layers and sort of facets of different things that might be happening with our mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is absolutely way more than mental toughness. And I know I see this especially in like the ultra running community right now, where there's almost like two sides, but there's definitely this big like push among certain people and certain voices on just push through at all costs, or just, and
Yeah.
I don't think people are saying push through injury, but there's just this huge like be gritty, be tough, and training your mind is so much more than just that. A lot of times that's like a side effect that happens. It's difficult to actually say like, here's the plan for how I'm going to build mental toughness, because it's just not that simple, and there's a lot more that goes into it. But I would rather people focus on how are they going to be able to execute their best race, because everybody is different. So if you are doing, again, like if you're doing an ultra race, that's a very, very long day. And for you, it might not be that when you have that low moment, you're trying to pull yourself out of it, but it might be that you're just trying to ride it out, because you know over like 10, 15, 20 hours, like you're definitely going to have low moments. So it's looking at what your race is and like who you are as a person and figuring out what's going to work best for you. And in that, you likely are building mental toughness, right? And you're also building that mental toughness by doing the long runs, by doing the harder physical training. We don't have to necessarily do these like super crazy extra tasks to achieve it. Sometimes there's a time and a place, but I think it almost happens a little bit more naturally than we would think. But mindset, training that, it's going to involve starting from, if we're working at like the beginning of a training cycle, it might even be understanding that your brain might be struggling with, I don't know how I'm going to run 20 miles when your long run right now is 6 miles. You don't need to do that now. So some of it's like trust, some of it's staying in the moment, a lot of it's building awareness, understanding motivation, how to generate that motivation, or even understanding you might not always have what feels like motivation. I know that's a big topic where people, will again wake up and like, I don't feel motivated. Okay, well, you're actually not going to feel motivated a lot of your training cycle. We need to kind of step away from that feeling of motivation to really, what's the end goal and why do we want that? Yep. And is that more important than like staying in bed or skipping that run, even if we don't feel the excitement or the motivation to go run? So some of it's like tweaking the understanding of that. A lot of it is around self-talk and really looking at what's going to be helpful for you, what's not helpful for you. That's like the foundational skill I teach everybody, is just like, are your thoughts helping or not? Okay. That's where we need to really jump off of. So it's in all of these other facets of sports psychology that we really are building the mental toughness.
I see. Yeah. And I love that you specifically mentioned motivation, because I think for so many runners, and like I work with and see a lot of runners who I think race too often. And I talk about this a lot, people who are just like constantly in a race training cycle. They never have an off season. They never have a break, because for them, they see that race kind of looming in front of them as the thing that keeps them motivated. Like they don't feel motivated to train or to like be active or whatever, to put the effort in, if they don't have this like end goal that they're kind of working towards, this very clear race day that's coming up. And as much as it's great to have a goal that we're working towards and have kind of that plan, at a certain point, if that's not really like, if that's the only thing that's motivating us is just like fear of failure on race day, then, maybe we need to reevaluate things. But the expectation that we are going to wake up every single day and want to go do that workout, or feel like we want to go do that workout, I think, and you've kind of confirmed here, is pretty unrealistic. And how do we get around that? And how do we continue to push forward, even on the day-to-day when that motivation isn't always going to be there or be reliable?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've worked a lot with elite athletes as well as not elite athletes. And that's something that I actually see as one of the biggest differences is elite
Interesting.
athletes have learned at this, not all of them all the time, but they feel like they have a better understanding or better grasp that I'm not always going to be motivated or have the feeling of motivation.
Yeah.
Like from a sports psychology like textbook perspective, like they're motivated, but they might not wake up with the feeling of it, and
Mhm.
they know I'm still going to go do this.
Yes.
Now, obviously, I do think that it's important to know, like, if there's a long stretch of time where you're really not motivated, we probably need to take a step back and not just keep pushing through. Like
Mhm.
that's going to lead to burnout and some not great things, but you're just not always going to feel it, and that's okay. And like, I think just what I see with elite athletes versus recreational or amateur athletes is more like, sorry, a trust and knowing in the process instead of like questioning everything. And it's not that they're just
Okay.
blindly trusting things, but there's more of, I guess some of it's like experience or wisdom, if you will. But like,
Yeah.
I'm going to do this regardless. I know why it's valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think part of it for like, an elite athlete who, training and performing and, that is sort of their job. Whereas like, we don't always want to get up and go to work in the morning, but it's our
Mhm.
job. Is that part of it? And sort of like, is there some overlap there with just the way that we view the training as recreational versus elite athletes?
That's a good point. It absolutely, yes, and it definitely varies. I know some elite and professional athletes really hate to think about it as a job because it
Oh,
removes
okay.
the joy and the fun. So
Fair
I
enough.
think so many answers are going to be like, it depends. Some people, that's what they need to be like, I don't want to do this, but this is my job. I need to get out the door today.
Yeah.
If they have that type of mindset, again, over like a longer period of time, that tends to remove some of the joy in doing it. And we still want to
Yeah.
try to figure out for all athletes, how do you like what you're doing? Because again,
Hmm.
even for us, or just people going to a 9 to 5 job, they might not always want to wake up and go,
Yeah.
but they know they have to. But also, if you're miserable all day doing that, or every single day you don't want to go, that's going to impact your quality of life. You're not a very
Hmm.
happy person. You probably are looking for a different job.
Yeah.
So you can like leverage that some, but you don't want that to be the only thing that you're using to get you out the door.
For sure. And remember, I mean, again, something I talk a lot about with people is needing an off season, needing a break in between races, giving yourself that kind of mental reset to not have the pressure of always following a training program. And remember, even from your 9 to 5 job, you still get vacation or you still deserve vacation time. So even with your job that you're very dedicated and have to show up for every single day, you still need some time off sometimes to just get that mental and physical reset. So, um, not a perfect analogy as far as analogies go, but something to keep in mind if you are somebody who tends to really cram your year full of events and races, and you're starting to feel that loss of love of running, like it's starting to feel like a bit disconnected, and maybe you're not seeing the performance gains over time that you want to, given the amount of training that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've mentioned a couple already, but what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see runners and other athletes making when it comes to their mindset? Like, what are some of the, maybe big red flags or big no-nos that you see out there, either with your clients or just maybe like, being perpetuated on social media and just kind of like out there being maybe shared and followed by some that you would say, that's probably bad advice.
Yeah. There's, yeah. I think the one that I'm going to go with is not necessarily like the biggest or the worst thing, but I see it the most frequently. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's valuable to mention is basically just comparing yourself to other people or doing what you feel like other people are doing to prepare for races. And what I mean by that is we'll see an interview with like an elite or Olympic athlete and we
Yeah.
hear what they do to prepare. And trust me, I love listening. It's so fascinating to me. Like I soak all of that up. But what I see sometimes people do is whether it's an elite athlete or even just a different person, they'll take that as like, this is what I have to do. And not even on sometimes it's, well, often it's also on the physical side with like so and so takes ice baths. So I will too. Do whatever you want. But like, I see a lot of people when it comes to mindset who will be like, oh, I read that somebody's meditating before the race. I will too.
Yeah.
Meditating is not a bad thing to do before a race, but it's only going to be helpful for some people. Same thing with like listening to like pump up music before a race. It's only going to be helpful for some people. Neither is right or wrong, but they're two separate things.
Mm-hmm. And opposite things.
Right. Yeah. So I was going to say, that's the thing is if you read that like, oh, Olympic champion, she meditates before her marathons, and you start doing that, you might be the person who needs pump up music. So now you're doing like the complete opposite of what you need.
Yeah.
And so everybody is so different, and there's genuinely in no capacity like one straight way to mentally prepare for a race, or to train your mind, or to build mental toughness. And any coach who's telling you, like mental performance coach, sports psychology, life coach, anybody who's telling you there's only one way, or like this is how you should be, that is completely incorrect. Everybody is different in the same way that if you're training for a marathon, and I always just default to marathon because it's like the easiest in my brain to comprehend, but this applies to everything. But if you're training for a marathon, the ingredients of your training plan are going to be the same for pretty much everybody, right? You're going to have to run a few times a week. There's going to be some longer runs. You're at some point going to have to like eat a gel or eat something in a run. But the number of long runs that you do can vary. How long you do your long run, that can vary. How many times a week you run can vary. So you can have 5 people that run a 4-hour marathon, and each of them had a different training plan.
Yep.
Same thing with mindset. And that's what I want people to understand is you need to figure out what works for you, not what just like the standard, here's what so-and-so did. Because social media is just making it very easy to be like, oh, this is what I should do. This is what I should do.
Yeah.
And kind of getting away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously we can extrapolate that exact scenario to everything. I mean, right? Like nutrition and training and sleep and mindset, like, you name it, what you see other people doing and comparing doesn't always work. And I think the big thing that is sort of missing from that conversation a lot of times around elite or professional athletes and why we shouldn't necessarily just copy and paste their strategies to ourselves is because a lot of times they have many, many more years and hours of experience under their belts to have found what works for them, like to have kind of refined that and figured it out. And also their access to professionals and consultants and, to a lot of these resources that, your kind of everyday runner may not necessarily have is also very different, And so it's part that. And then of course, there are people who are just really genetically blessed when it comes to their athletic abilities. And whether they listen to pump up music or they meditate before they do a race, is that really going to make a huge difference given that they are so highly trained, right? Like just because that's what they choose to do doesn't mean that's what they're going to do forever. And also it may just be that, as someone who is just, in that upper 1% echelon of capabilities, they're going to have, probably a better race than any of us could ever dream of, almost no matter what they do beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel like I could go on for a really long time about it, but it's tough. And I will say this, I don't see this as much with running coaches because most running coaches work remotely, but this is actually something I see a lot in like the college and high school athlete or coaching domain really, is coaches will either say what they did as athletes or just what they read in a book or somewhere. And they want all of their athletes to basically follow like the exact same, plan, but be like, I had worked with one team and the coach wanted all of the athletes to be very like serious and focused before the game. And a number of those athletes were like, I'm playing horribly. What's going on? And they basically, by being focused, they were so in their head that they were overthinking like times a million. And so those athletes, what they actually needed was to just go like goof off with their friends and listen to music and joke around and not think about the game. They just needed to distract themselves.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the same for runners or really anybody, that some people need to be focused beforehand and really kind of quiet and thinking. Other people do not. And neither is better or worse than the other, but we're just different. And really, it's okay if someone tells you like, this is what you should do, even if it's a coach. If that's not what works for you, like you have to do what's going to work for you.
For sure, for sure. And that probably speaks to why some people find it so much easier to like train or compete like with other runners, and some people prefer to do things solo, right? Maybe some
Yeah.
people prefer to be sort of just with their own thoughts and their own mindset, and to just kind of zone out and maybe listen to their favorite music. And other people really love the camaraderie and the conversation around like a group run. And again, everybody's different. Everyone's going to have a totally different experience with it. That's really fascinating. What are some things that you wish more athletes knew about the power of their mindset? You know, you had mentioned from your experience as a young athlete that, you know, it sort of opened this whole world for you, obviously, and you know, you've even made a wonderful career out of it, which is so cool. And it's something that I think a lot of people don't know is modifiable, or, you know, like isn't something they necessarily have like any kind of power or control over. So what are some of the things that you wish people knew about how they can change or shift, or you know, how much power they have over their mindset?
Yeah, and I'd say it's really that just that you do have that you do have that power to shift your
Yeah.
mindset. Because I mean, I know it's so easy, right? Like we have, even if it's, you know, before a race and we have just that little like, I don't know if I can set that PR or whatever, like you're trying to do, you're like just have the little moment of doubt. Even just knowing that you don't have to really listen or engage with that thought. We're
Mm-hmm.
always going to have negative thoughts. We're not going to always be having them, but they will always exist, right? You can be the strongest, most tough mental, you know, athlete in the world. You're still going to have doubt. You're still going to experience negative thoughts. They're not going to completely go away, but it's really knowing that you do not have to really entertain them. They can be, as like, I think the mindfulness app Headspace is like, it's just like clouds, right? Like the thought comes in, it passes by like a cloud, it goes out.
Oh,
It
I love
doesn't have
that.
to be something that we automatically turn into a truth. It doesn't have to be a
Okay.
fact. We don't have to
Yep.
believe it. It just can be a thought that we are saying, I'm not really going to listen to that one, because
Okay.
there's always going to be so much chatter in our mind.
Yep.
So that, and then kind of pairing that with just, you have some amount of choice over your thoughts. Some of them are going to just show up. We need to recognize that and understand that. But also, like, you get to choose and go into race morning with, what thoughts do I want to have? There's going to be some that I didn't put in my brain that will show up, but what ones do I want to have in there? And how do I
Okay.
want to intentionally shift my mindset and direct it?
Yeah.
Because there's power in knowing that you can do that. And then there's like benefit and power in actually doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And so on that note, that's a really kind of nice segue to the next thing that I wanted to chat about today is, you know, do you have sort of a simple technique or tip, or something, you know, kind of tangible that you can share with our listeners to give them an idea of what this sort of mindset coaching is kind of all about? Like you mentioned, having, you know, being able to pick your thoughts and sort of choosing the thoughts that you want to be having in your mind, and stuff like that. Like, is there a little kind of exercise that you can share that will sort of give people a bit of a taste of what this can feel like, or what this can be all about?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to go back to what I said earlier of like helpful versus unhelpful thoughts being a foundational skill. So I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it like as an exercise, but basically, like, whatever task you have, a lot of people, like a ton of people, it's the tempo run. So that's usually my default on
That
things
was
people.
Okay, I kid you not, I knew where you were going with that sentence, and that was exactly what popped into my mind, was a tempo run immediately. That is so
Yeah,
funny.
that is the one that, I mean, I feel like the funny thing is I actually like love tempo runs.
Do you?
So
Yeah.
it makes me laugh so much because, I mean, and I get it, but I think it's very similar, like on a physiological level, to like how swim training was. So I think my body and my mind are more used to that type of like zone, if you will. But yeah,
Yeah.
everybody hates tempo runs for the most part. But whatever
Yeah.
the thing is, right, that you tend to like dread or have some not great thoughts around,
Yeah.
I want you to pay attention to your thoughts and really start asking yourself, is this thought helping me? Yes or no? So if you're like,
Okay.
I don't want to do this, Ron,
Yeah. I
is
can't
that
do
thought
this.
helping you? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is this helping me? Yes or no?
Okay.
And some of that is developing awareness around how often we're having thoughts that are not helping us.
Yeah.
But two, it's really just teaching you like, nope, this one's not helping me. And what the next part is, but it's also a very natural response would be, well, then what is going to help me? And it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be, I love tempo runs. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to crush it. Because
Yeah.
maybe you're going to crush it, but you're probably not going to love it. And if you're trying to
Yeah.
force yourself into, I'm going to love this, this is going to be amazing,
Yeah.
it's not really going to work because it's not true. So instead of
Sure.
what's going
Sure.
to be helpful for you, maybe it's, I do not love this run, but I know why it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Or this is going to make me tougher, or whatever the response is for you, but
Yeah.
shifting it to something that's just more helpful. And
Okay.
it's such a valuable skill because it teaches you to recognize. So it's building a ton of awareness. And what
Yeah.
happens then is once we start doing this and practicing it more, we're more aware of what types of unhelpful thoughts we have so we can catch them more quickly
Yep.
and change them more easily. And then it
Yep.
also allows us to go, oh, here's what tends to be helpful for me.
Yep.
Instead of waiting for the unhelpful, we're just going to like pre-plan with the helpful.
Okay. Okay. So rather than trying to always just shift our thoughts away from the negative to this sort of, um, force, sort of shoving the super
Mm-hmm.
positive, everything is sunshine and rainbows, m- mantras or mindsets or thoughts kind of down our throats, which may not be helpful, like you said, because it isn't true to say like, oh, this is easy, this feels amazing, I could do this forever. Because if you can run at that pace forever, then it ain't a tempo run. But instead to just be thinking about what's actually going to help me get through this moment, and sort of being, I guess, more realistic about our thoughts and kind of approaching it that way versus just aiming for this level of positivity that probably isn't going to make a difference.
Yeah. And I will say,
Yeah.
I've worked with some people who that level of positivity is exactly what they need.
Sure.
And that's fine. We're not saying that that's not it, but it's really like, if for you, it's not it, try something else. Basically, like
Yeah.
what
Doesn't
will
have
be
to be it.
helpful. And sometimes I feel like the really nice thing with this type of exercise is that you can do it in the moment and you can genuinely ask yourself, like in the moment, what would help me right now? What is going to help? And it has to be like, what's going to help me do the run? Not like, oh, well, I'm just going to go get breakfast instead. Like that's not really helping. But like,
Yeah.
that might be a
Still
better
have to
thought.
finish the
That's,
tempo run.
yeah, we're not really accomplishing the task then. But you can learn when you're truly like in it and experiencing those thoughts and emotions, what is going to be the most helpful way to get through it.
Yeah.
And sometimes like it's hard when we're just now like sitting down talking. We might have an idea of what's going to be helpful and that might work, but it also, when you're truly in it, it might be a totally different type of thought. And you're like, okay, this works. And
Yeah.
then, you can use that the next time that you have that run and those thoughts come up. You already kind of know what's going to help you be getting through it. So I
Yeah.
know I use that all the time. Like as soon as I start to feel nerves start like creeping up a little bit, I already know what my like helpful thoughts are. And I go to them before I let the anxiety start building a lot, before I let the
Okay.
like, I don't want to do this. We're switching it early.
Okay. Okay. I love that so much. And I also really like that this is something that people can incorporate that isn't like taking time outside of the training they're already doing, like the time that they're already spending on their training. Because I think, what a lot of people might assume about sports psychology and might assume about mindset training is it is, okay, now I have to spend an extra, even like 10, 20 minutes or something like that, doing something like meditation, which of course meditation is fabulous and, something that I'm sure can benefit a lot of people. But let's be realistic about how much time we have to dedicate to these additional tasks, right? We already know how little time people spend on their strength training and their foam rolling and, all of those things. So to have a really great, other aspect of training that we're just layering in on top of the workouts that are already being done, I think that there's really no reason that people wouldn't be able to start incorporating some of this stuff and to start working on some of this stuff during their workouts. And I can see tremendous power and benefit, for the clients that I work with for sure of just having some of those tips and strategies. So I love that.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, who is, kind of a great candidate to work with a mindset coach or to work with like a sports psychology consultant like yourself? Like who are the people who you think definitely, would benefit the most from working with you?
Yeah. So I'll say the people that I see the most frequently are typically the people who are struggling in some way, whether
Mm,
that's they've set a goal and they have fallen short of it several times. They keep getting the same type of result and they're like, something's not working,
yeah.
kind of narrowed it down to it's probably related to my mindset. I need help with this. That is probably the biggest thing that I see, or people that are like, I'm dealing with a lot of like, again, kind of like a lot of that pre-race anxiety or something that is really, really detracting from their experience in sport. Those people are always going to benefit. And yeah, I'm not saying like they shouldn't. Those people absolutely, when you notice and recognize something. But unfortunately, I really feel like it's same thing. I guess the same thing as like running, coaching, nutrition. There's so many. Everyone's going to benefit from it. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
How valuable do you feel like it is to you? And what we're seeing more and more in organizations, so like Major League Baseball teams, college teams, more and more of these organizations are bringing somebody in, bringing in a sports psych. And instead of that person being there for when something goes wrong or when somebody has all that pre-race anxiety, they're just incorporating mental skills training throughout the whole season. So it's just
Okay.
becoming not another one of the things that you do, but it's you have strength and conditioning, you have your physical training, you go to your PTs, you have your nutrition, you have all of these different pieces.
Okay.
And more places are just making it, this is another aspect, this is another piece of the puzzle. And that
Yeah.
is what I wish it was seen as, because it works better when we're almost like in a good place. And then
Yeah.
when you start to really struggle, you already have some of these skills instead of waiting until you're really, really suffering. I
Yes.
understand it's not feasible for everybody to take advantage of sports psychology, but between even just listening to podcasts like this one, which is
Yep.
not going to, change the world, but there's still value in it. Like if that's all you can do, at least start with that.
Yep.
Everybody will benefit in some way.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's sort of like you said, with any kind of training, any of these modalities and approaches and different professionals who work with athletes, everyone's going to benefit to some degree. There's nobody who isn't going to get something out of working with a coach, out of working with a sports psychology consultant, out of working with a dietitian, even if they don't have a big long list of things they need to work on and it's just about minor tweaks and reassurance that you're on the right track, then there's definitely some value there. But if you're listening to this episode and you're like, wow, I've been trying to break a certain PR in my marathon, or, I can't seem to get my long runs done, or, I always have so many issues with these tempo runs or whatever it might be. And you know that in your position of struggling or, not reaching your full potential because something with your mindset is holding you back, or just because you've tried to achieve a certain goal a couple of times and have not been successful, now the anxiety and the issues with your mindset around that looming goal now being kind of held over you is definitely a big burden. Then you're probably someone who's going to benefit like even more so from getting help in this department.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how do you work with athletes? So if somebody is listening to this and they're like, oh my goodness, like I totally need this, because like I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I totally need this. Then how do you work with people? Where can people find you and connect with you and learn more about your services?
Yeah. So my website, I'll just start with that. My website is just my last name. And then, so it's mulcahyperformance.com. All of the information is there. I have an Instagram as well. So either of those are great places to just start. If you're like, who are you? I want to know more about you, or kind of some of the types of things that I work with people on. Those are great places to start. And then
What's
I
your
work with
Instagram
people,
handle?
Mulcahy Performance. Yeah, so
Perfect.
everything's the same. Sorry.
Yep.
So in working with people, everything is done remotely. God bless the Zoom craze
The
that
Zoom
has
generation. Yeah.
I'm
Love it.
actually like so grateful for that right now. But so I work with everybody remotely. I have 3 different tiers for working with people so that it gives better options for people with budgets, because they understand, especially the world right now with like inflation and everything, I want to be as accessible as possible. And we meet either like once every other week, once every week. I have like an app or a platform that you can use where I send you a weekly check-in, a daily training journal, as well as different mindset activities that you can complete. Some of them are just like a visualization exercise. Some of it is, hey, let's write out your pre-performance plan. And then that's something like we go over together and figure out, hey, is this the best? What could we tweak? There's a lot of moving parts with it, but it all is really designed to not take too much time out of your day. I know we talked about that earlier, and that's like a big thing for me is I don't want it to take more than like 15, 20 minutes out of your whole week to do this stuff. Mm-hmm. But I'll just leave it with that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, for anybody listening who, definitely feels like this is an area that they could use some more coaching and help in, then, Shannon is a great resource, not just with, the free resources and stuff like that she puts out. I actually participated in one of her recent challenges that she had, and it was really fun to, try some of the exercises and things that she sent out via email. And then of course, being able to work with her one-on-one and get that little bit of fine-tuned help. All right. So thank you so much, Shannon, once again for being here. It was really, really great chatting with you and having you share your wisdom with me and with my audience. And for everyone listening, thanks so much for tuning in to the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast. And make sure to go give Shannon a follow and connect with her. And we will see you in next week's episode. Bye for now. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for the diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.